Hi, everyone, and welcome to the BSIC biweekly webinar. Today, we have the extreme pleasure of welcoming the World Economic Forum team and the University National of Colombia's team who worked on an exciting project on the Public Ethereum around blockchain, corruption, and procurement. And we're going to hear all about it. By way of introduction, I want to introduce our speakers. We have Ashley Lannquist, who's the project lead for blockchain and digital currency at the World Economic Forum Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution in San Francisco. She's also the co-founder of Mobility Open Blockchain Consortium, MOBI, and UC Berkeley's Blockchain Unlocked Executive Education Program. Next up is Rachel Davidson Raycraft. She is a 2019-2020 World Economic Forum research assistant and co-author of the forum's forthcoming report on the blockchain-based procurement. And she wrote the legal and policy aspect involved in the project. Then we have Sebastian Banescu, who's a senior research and design engineer at QuantStamp in Germany, and who was the technical advisor to this program. And last but not least, Mauricio Tobar, who's a researcher of electronic engineer at the Universidad Nacional de Colombia. He is also the co-director of the Inter-Colombia Research Group. And for this specific project, he was the product owner and the product manager. So we're going to have an interactive session today. We're really excited to have all our speakers. We're going to start by having a presentation done by Ashley for everyone to really understand the project and how the WEF and stakeholders in Colombia work together to roll out this ambitious project. And then we'll dive into a conversation. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat during all the time, and we'll take the questions as they come along. We want this to be a really interactive session. And of course, we'll send you the recording after this, and it will be posted on our social media and our YouTube channel. Ashley, do you want to kick us off with your presentation?
Yes, thank you. I think this screen share has to end of whoever is screen sharing now. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. I'll walk through our project briefly. So this is joint work with an extensive team, including some people who are on the line now. This project, led by the World Economic Forum, is exploring blockchain technology for government transparency. We are investigating, and we have investigated, the use of blockchain technology for public procurement to reduce corruption in procurement. As a quick summary, public procurement is the site where more corruption is lost in terms of dollar amounts around the world globally, more than any other public sector activity. What is it? It's the process of contracting or tendering of the government, where at the local, regional, or national levels, the government purchases goods, services, or other works like building bridges or airports or supplying schools or hospitals. And so whenever there's this type of a purchase or a contract to build a bridge, there's typically competitive bidding and this contract offered out for bidding so that the government can pay a competitive and low price, and that there's open competition in whomever wins this contract. Globally, almost $10 trillion is spent on public procurement contracts around the world. And corruption in this process is staggering. Again, it's where more corruption happens than anywhere else in the world in terms of public sector activity. 57% of foreign bribery cases are for obtaining a public procurement contract. 10 to 30% of a contract's overall value is found to be lost to corruption, diverted to the pockets of corrupt officials. So if we look at these numbers, it's about $1.5 to $3 trillion annually in total that's estimated to be lost to procurement corruption. Of course, it's very hard to measure. This rounds out to about $2 2 to 3% of global GDP. In Colombia, where we focus, the situation is about mid-level in terms of countries, according to Transparency International Corruption's Perceptions Index. About 5% of GDP is lost to public sector corruption in total, the most of that being procurement, which is $17 billion. So this issue was identified quite immediately by our team, and it's a well-known issue around the world. In some countries, public procurement corruption is actually the leading problem of the country, stifling economic, social, environmental progress and quality of life improvement. So it's a really significant challenge. And the extent of procurement corruption varies globally very much, but the causes are generally common. They relate to the complexity of the procurement process, frequent interactions between public sector and private sector individuals as part of this process, and opaque transactions and decisions that are very much left to humans, decision makers at the government level. We wanted to investigate whether we could improve transparency in the decisioning of basically who gets awarded these government contracts. This is where a lot of this corruption activity happens, by using the blockchain-based or digital electronic procurement. So this project is a partnership among 3 institutions: the World Economic Forum, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the Office of the Inspector General of Colombia. So the project took place in Colombia. Mauricio Tovar on the phone was the technical project manager and leader of the development of a proof of concept that we developed. We developed a blockchain-based e-procurement proof of concept that we'll talk about. And so it was very much the case that the Inspector General of Colombia and the Colombian administration wanted to explore how blockchain can help with this problem that they recognize existing in procurement in Colombia and around the world. There are 4 key phases to procurement corruption we wanted to touch on quickly. This is a chart from Transparency International. Basically starts with planning, the needs assessment. Okay, what does the government need to contract and build or procure? The bidding phase, where different competitors submit bids for how they would fulfill this contract and at what price they would need to get paid. And then the bid evaluation, or the review and scoring of the bid offers by the government entity who issued this tender offer. And then lastly, the implementation and monitoring of the contract, and basically the contract execution. How is this being delivered afterwards? And this is just a snapshot for the purpose of this presentation, but we did a very deep analysis of the issues and problems in these stages with in-person interviews in Colombia, as well as discussions with major international organizations and extensive research. And as a quick view, the places where corruption tends to occur across this pipeline are undue influence on that early needs assessment, bid offer tailoring, where the government will tailor the tender offer that it's giving out to the public about what it wants to see in this contract in a way that favors a specific company. Bribery, vendor bid collusion, where the vendors get together and they set a higher price together. Conflicts of interest, where the public sector official might have had help in the election process from someone who works at a private sector entity, and then he or she wants to pay back that organization. Fraudulent submissions of fraudulent bid submissions, and fraudulent bid evaluation processes where they're not scoring fairly, or the vendors lies about information in the bid offer. Poor contract price benchmarking, where the typical price for what this contract should be at to build a bridge for however many $1 million, for instance, isn't well benchmarked. The pricing isn't clear, and that allows for usually too high or too low price offerings that each have repercussions and inadequate record keeping. So we chose to focus in our project on the bidding and bid evaluation stages. There's a lot of processes here that can be automated, can be captured electronically, that are in the hands of individuals. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case, and that we wanted to see if we could capture these processes in blockchain technology if it would help. So basically we developed a proof of concept that starts with the city or the government publishing the tender offer. In other words, we're going to bridge or hire these services for this specific range of money and terms, all the way to the competitors submitting their bids, the city or tenderer evaluating and scoring those bids, and ultimately deciding who wins the bid. That's the range of our focus. And the goals were to identify whether blockchain can help with transparency and accountability of that process, and to also develop groundwork for similar experimentation and innovation worldwide. So the World Economic Forum's approach is not to just conduct research or for one particular environment, and that's it, but we want to publish our research and share it with the world so that others can build upon it, and that we're contributing to the global understanding of the capabilities of blockchain technology, in this case, for a particular issue. As a result, we are publishing an extensive report on our work in this project. It's coming out next week on June 17 on Wednesday. So you can keep an eye out for that. It's a comprehensive feasibility study and analysis of blockchain-based public procurement. And it includes several elements: technical design and limitations, policy recommendations, civic engagement strategy, for getting participants involved in monitoring the process, a model RFP for governments who might want to hire a team to develop this solution for themselves, analysis of additional anti-corruption use cases, and a lot of extensive research on the policy side, and building off of work that other researchers have done. So altogether, it's likely this is the most comprehensive and in-depth study of blockchain for anti-corruption. Okay, so to get a little more detailed, we, as mentioned, developed a software POC developed by Mauricio Tovar and his team at the National University of Colombia to really study the key capabilities of blockchain and limitations for this public procurement use case. We focused on vendor bidding and bid evaluation, and the POC has been designed for the Ethereum mainnet, so for public permissionless Ethereum. We really wanted to investigate how public permissionless Ethereum, as the original blockchain technology and the one that probably has the most promise within anti-corruption because of some of its features that we'll talk about, how it fares with this use case. We also investigated complementary policy proposals that any government would want to implement along with any technology solution. So it was very much our philosophy that technology alone, of course, can't solve very challenging human problems like corruption. And so the technology intervention should be complemented by policy actions and changes as well. And of course, one of our conclusions, just to get ahead a little bit, is that no technology nor new policies can eliminate corruption that happens from these very human behaviors around bribery and conflicts of interest. So blockchain, we definitely do not find it to be a silver bullet or a panacea, but rather one potential tool to be complemented with policies, but also continuous political buy-in, institutional change, and cultural change to really move the needle in corruption. We focused our work on the public school meals program of Colombia, La Programa de Alimentación Escolar. This provides breakfast and lunch for the most in-need children of Colombia. So it's very important service, the governments of different municipalities provide tender offers for different food vendors to provide the meals. And so we wanted to put that process in our system, on our system, and run the procurement process for it to more transparently select these food vendors. Historically, this school meals program has been a site of market corruption in Colombia. Back in 2017, it was found that chicken breasts for meals were bought at 4 times the grocery store or market price, and that 32 million meals went undelivered in 2016. There have been senior level government officials in Colombia who have been fired and I believe imprisoned for this activity. So it's a very sensitive and high priority subject within Colombia, of course, and so we wanted to pay particular attention to this use case. Why blockchain? To give a preview of our discussion, blockchain has certain features, most notably the ability to provide permanent and tamper-proof record keeping of actions, of documents, of bid offers, of comments that the public makes while they're monitoring the activity of the procurement process, of scoring decisions. So that was a very high potential feature for us. And we can also have real-time procedural transparency and auditability. So basically, everyone would be able to see the decisions and the process happening in real time as it's logged in Ethereum blockchain as it's happening. And we can have automated functionalities with smart contracts. For instance, the smart contracts would enforce a minimum time period for bidding so that a tenderer cannot stop bidding short, for instance, and also minimum time periods that are required actually by the law, but that sometimes get overlooked or sidestepped for public comment and review. We also had automatic flags happening for risky behavior in our system as well. And of course, blockchain also allows for the possibility of citizen engagement where comments and records can't be deleted or removed. So we have this capability of uncensored citizen engagement. And then to wrap up, the high-level technical parameters that we were working with that we'll get into a discussion about included the requirement to integrate with Colombia's existing e-procurement system, which actually our solution could stand alone independently. Doesn't need to integrate, but that was one of our requirements in this Colombian context. Also to have unrestricted civic and public visibility into the process and the ability to leave comments during the various phases. And also vendor anonymity during the bidding process, and confidentiality of the terms of their bid offers, such as the prices that they're offering. It's very important to have this anonymity of the vendors during the period that they're submitting the bids so that they can't collude with one another over pricing and for other reasons. And also for the details of the bids to be confidential so that someone who submits a bid after other bids can't react to the prices of prior bids and set prices higher or lower as a result. Of course, vendors they shouldn't be able to change their bids once submitted or after the bidding period, and no one should know who's placing these bids, not the bidders or the government tenders or actually even any other party. So that's an overview of the project before we get into our discussion. And we really wanted to know, and Vanessa can lead this discussion, based on these requirements and based on this view, what were technical challenges? But before we get to that, I think we might have some other discussion as well. Vanessa, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thank you so much for this comprehensive explanation of the project. And I think before we get into sort of the technical aspects and what the teams had to solve for, we see that we have very large stakeholders, whether it's international organizations like WEF or the Inter-American Development Bank, but also the local governments. And Mauricio, since you're based in Colombia, we would love to learn more about what the technical environment is there. How did you manage to bring in so many stakeholders to work on this project? And what was the day-to-day working there?
Yeah, thank you, Vanessa, for inviting me. And I have to say that I'm very proud to be part of this amazing team. Um, yeah, I have to say that we're very lucky, not only because of the leadership of the World Economic Forum and the IDB, and also the General Inspector Office, but also because I think that you saw the problem that we have. Ashley presented very well the corruption problem that we have in Colombia, but the national government and the local government of Medellin, they know about this problem, and they're trying to find solutions or to encourage the ecosystem, the technical ecosystem, the technology ecosystem, the startup ecosystem to find some solutions to fight corruption. So we were very lucky for that, because the national government, the General Inspector Office, and the local government and other actors like the e-procurement agency that it's in Spanish, Colombia Compra Eficiente, help us a lot and were very attending for anything that we need. And maybe we also, I also think that it's important to say that the Colombian government is supporting a lot to the industry and to the public sector to use a lot of these for industrial revolution technologies to solve the problems of Colombia. We have here an affiliate center of the World Economic Forum of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So there is some characteristics that not in all the projects you can have. So I think that we are very lucky to have all of the supports of all of these institutions. The World Economic Forum, the IDB, the General Inspector Office, national government, local government, and also the National University of Colombia.
Great. So diving into the technical challenges, you can imagine that being on a public blockchain, there are issues around the fact that it's pseudonymous, that you want to maintain confidentiality around people who are bidding, the information, but also the privacy of citizens that can participate in the project. So in terms of general key technical challenges, and maybe starting with Sevi, how did you maintain anonymity of the vendors and other participants?
Thanks for the question, Vanessa. Yeah, that's a very interesting aspect, given that we implemented this on the public Ethereum mainnet. And the solution is that we use the cryptographic commitment scheme in order to allow the vendors to place their bids. Therefore, whenever a vendor needed to place a bid, they generated a new address where they used to create the transaction. And inside of this transaction, we basically encrypted the bid details as well as the identity of the bidder. And we basically use this commitment scheme to place all the details encrypted on the IPFS network, and a hash pointing to that IPFS data we stored on the Ethereum mainnet. This way, it was possible to basically guarantee that the bidders will not be able to see each other's bids, and no one will be able to see what the bid value is, nor the identities of these bidders, so they cannot collude with each other on price fixing. And we also ensured that they will only reveal after the bidding stage has finished. Now, of course, this has several challenges, such as how do these bidders attain cryptocurrency, because it may be challenging if you have not had any experience with this. However, in our solution, we basically offer the possibility of vendors to use a classical website, which is preloaded with cryptocurrency in order to place their bids.
So you're saying that they don't realize that they're on the public Ethereum mainnet. For them, it's just a regular bidding portal.
Yes, indeed. But we also, for those who are tech savvy, we also give them the possibility to purchase their own cryptocurrency and to place the bid directly using the smart contracts that we have implemented. Basically, the web application is just an interface for the smart contract. And we also communicate with the Colombian bidding systems that Ashley mentioned we needed to integrate with. So those are the things that we offer with our solution.
And so we see that the vendor's anonymity is guaranteed, the content of the bid is guaranteed, but I imagine in this market, everyone knows each other. What if they still manage to talk to each other, collude, and try to modify their bids after they submit it?
Right. Is that for me?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, if a vendor is able to, is going to modify their bid after they have placed it, this is easily detectable by anyone on the network because the first bid cannot be erased. It's there permanently in the transaction. And we, any user basically, once they get the key of the bidder, they can verify whether the original bid has been modified using public key signatures.
Got it. And was there any discussion around the system being attacked or spammed, or to try to game the system?
Yes, yes. So basically, the solution that we have implemented at the moment, which uses a preloaded wallet, is indeed susceptible to spamming attacks where anyone can just come and place a bid or create a large number of bids draining the contract, the funds in the contract. And this basically we have catered to with solutions such as IP filtering and basically denying the service of from the same user or the same location in the same location trying to submit over and over again. Of course, this does not completely close the door for attackers. However, it increases the difficulty, and we also need to think about what the attackers gain through this. So even if they manage to drain, we can basically add more ETH to the contract itself. And of course, in the future, my hope is that purchasing Ether or whatever cryptocurrency to pay for such a transaction will be equivalent to purchasing paper, ink, and stamps to submit a hard copy, right? So that would be ideal.
Got it. And so I think thank you, Sebi. And I think what was quite unique, and maybe because I don't know well procurement processes, is that citizens could participate very openly in the process and act sort of as counterbalance, or are able to provide comments and public comments. How did you organize that, given that it is on the blockchain and there are also privacy issues around that? And this is more a question for Mauricio, who's maybe closer to the local procurement process.
Yeah, sure. One thing that is very powerful of this project is that we want the citizen to engage the platform and to help to the General Inspector Office to find some possible corruption cases. But this is very, very sensitive because, there's a lot of money in this procurement. So if you put some alert, and because of that alert, the General Inspector Office found that there was a corruption case in that moment, the vendor will lose their contract. and if you have put it, and if the business is enough big, it's very important for the vendor to know who did the alert for the general inspector office, and that can be a danger for that person. So for us, the privacy is very important in this platform, and we don't we don't need any ID, and we designed just a web page very easy to use. For the vendors and for the tender, we design a client, but for the citizens, we just did a web page very easy to use, and we don't need any ID information of the citizens, so they have all the anonymity to do all the comments that they want, and we don't track any information about it.
Got it. And I have another question for you, Mauricio. You know, the fact that you guys used a public platform doesn't mean that it's free. So how did you manage gas fees in the process? Were they taken on by the persons organizing the bids? How did you, were there any other issues that arose about the gas management?
Yeah, the gas fees was a very interesting challenge for the project, because, you know, the gig people like us, we know how to use it because we live with this all days. But for the regular people, for the regular vendors, for tenders, this is very new. Only to buy Ether, for example, only to buy cryptocurrency is just is not easy, actually. So we have to do some training process in that sense, but also we found some problems or challenges in the legal and regulatory framework, because in Colombia it's not illegal to use cryptocurrency, but the financial authority sent a letters, not a law, nothing official, but sent in the past a letter for the banks or for the financial institution, saying that they cannot use or buy, sell, or anything with cryptocurrencies. So just for the financial sector, they have that restriction. But the other public sector say, okay, the financial institution authority is saying that, and it's part of the government, so I cannot say something different. I know that it's not illegal. I know that it's not, that we don't have any law that say that you cannot use it, but it's a little difficult and confused. In summary, it's not clear. It's not totally clear, the situation. So that's another challenge for the public institution to use. And another challenge is that these gas fees are variable. It depends on the price of Ether. It depends on the demand of the network. So it's very variable. So for those institutions to buy, how the amount of Ether that I have to buy, it depends on the case. It depends on the price and different things. And yeah, and we think that some step must be taken to secure that the gas fee doesn't reveal the submitting vendor identity. For example, to funding the hidden ID must not come from sending of ETH from an account known to be associated with a vendor. So that's another challenge that we find with the gas fees in the permissionless blockchain, like Ethereum permissionless blockchain.
So we have 3 questions in the chat, and I want to take 2 of them as they're related to our discussion. One is from Nestor, and I'll just read it. So in order for a citizen to alert, I won't require to provide any information, neither name nor ID, for security purposes. Is that correct? And
yeah,
if that's correct, what is the script that randomizes IP to create automatically the X amount of accounts that consume gas?
do you want to jump in that, Sebi? Or
Yeah.
it's true that we don't ask for any ID. The citizen don't need to put any information. I don't know if Sebi, do you want to answer the IP?
Yeah, so basically, we are aware that this attack might be possible, and right now we're restricting sending multiple messages at a very high frequency. So right now, if we get a message, we basically throttle the number of messages that we get, so that basically it's allowed to send something at certain intervals. And like we also considered what would be the economic incentive of an attacker to do such an attack. He would not be able to gain any financial benefit from being able to send so many comments. And of course, like we have ideas about how to apply software diversity in order to slightly change the interface, such that if someone develops such a script, we can slightly change how the interface of the web application is designed, such that the script would no longer work if it's even if it's implemented with technologies such as Selenium or so. We can slightly change how it looks, such that for a human eye it's the same, but for an automated script it's different, and that would further increase the applicability, right? And we can also employ solutions such as reCAPTCHA to detect if it's an automated script or if it's a human.
Great. And one of the other questions was it easy to switch to blockchain, and does it require constant upgrade, or is it just a one-time heavy investment if you were to implement this POCs in production?
I can answer that.
Yeah,
it was a challenge in this project that we don't just need to develop the proof of concept on blockchain, but also we need to connect the POC with the system, the national system, or the system of the e-procurement institution of Colombia, because the law said that any process, any public procurement process in Colombia have to be registered in that system. So for us to do it, taking in account the requirements or the project, to do it only in blockchain, it wasn't easy, but it for me was most challenging. The most challenge was to connect the blockchain project or the blockchain platform with the platform of the national government. For me, that was the main challenge using this technology. I don't know if someone want to add in that.
Oh, okay. And so I see that you made the choice of using public Ethereum, which is a very specific, choice and probably deliberate. Why did you choose that specific configuration? As you said, it might be difficult to integrate with existing systems. What made you prompt that choice, and what were the criteria that you used to make that determinations?
Yeah, for this specific use case, we need some characteristic of the platform, of the blockchain. We need permanent records that cannot be deleted, and the hash rate and the security of the permissionless blockchain of Ethereum, it's one of the highest. Also, we have to find the ecosystem around the platform, and we think that Ethereum have the biggest developer communities to find solutions when we have some problems with some parts of the projects. We also have the capabilities in the National University. Our experience was in Ethereum permission and permissionless. So that was another factor, but very important because we need smart contracts. And for us, Ethereum is the most advanced platform in smart contracts in the moment that we start the project and right now.
Great. And, you know, moving away from the purely technical issues that you have to solve for, you know, this project is really innovative, and the role of the World Economic Forum is really to help governments and other companies and large companies to share information and get really key insights. So I want to move on to Rachel, who really looked at the legal and policy side of it. And we have a question in the chat that's related to that, but why did you consider that there should be such an emphasis on the policy? How did you approach it? And what were the key takeaways or recommendations from a policy perspective?
Sure. So, given the extent and global proliferation of procurement corruption, countries almost universally have already enacted and codified a pretty complex framework of laws and policies to prevent and also punish these types of corrupt acts. So we felt as a team that to maximize the anti-corruption potential of blockchain-based procurement, we really needed to understand the existing framework, its successes, its failures, and then how a technological solution can best fit into this existing space. And then in addition, what complementary policy proposals need to be adopted by governments in order to really maximize the anti-corruption potential. And this sort of speaks to the question raised by David as to, you know, we are really fortunate to work with the government partners that we did in Colombia, but how would this work with less cooperative government officers or agencies? And I think on the one hand, it is a self-selective process, and that the process of implementing such a system in itself requires willing government partners. And then the sustainability definitely continues to depend on those partners. And I think you can get that type of cooperation, one, by the pure cost of corruption right now. I think the Odebrecht case in Latin America really brought to light the incredibly high costs of procurement corruption, and that those high costs in themselves create willing government partners, but sometimes that enthusiasm can be limited in terms of time frame. There's a fallout after a number of years after this kind of case comes to light. So I think that's where one of our key policy recommendations is really proactively engaging third-party citizen monitors. And the various steps governments can take to empower these monitors is, I think, one of the most powerful tools to keeping the cooperation going long-term. And so these monitors should be legally empowered and thus could hold non-compliant government partners to account, whether in the national legal system or sometimes in international arbitration courts. And so this type of legal empowerment also raises the cost to non-cooperation. Other important aspects of the citizen monitorships is definitely, as Ashley briefly mentioned, like ensuring they're protected from reprisal, and supplying them with intuitive tools. So like checklists, things that seem basic but go a really long way when it comes to citizen monitorships. Another key recommendation from the policy side is, as we've mentioned, blockchain is a really exciting technological development, but definitely not a silver bullet when it comes to this kind of problem that is so human intensive. And so finding ways to either mandate or incentivize use of the platform, in that, you know, the best practices are an open competitive auction, which the blockchain platform decreases the costs of, both in terms of time and money. But you could also use it, and arguably should use it, to record direct, more limited processes like direct contracting or negotiated contracts. And I think that's a particularly exciting capacity right now during the COVID-19 pandemic, where governments are reasonably, at least to a certain extent, relying on these limited processes. And so blockchain would allow an opportunity to shed light on these sort of more closed door, more intimate processes that often open space for greater corruption.
And one of the questions we have from Ben is, on the ground, did you encounter any pushback from some of the local agencies? And if so, how did you resolve them on that? And maybe this is a question for you, Rachel, but also Mauricio. Was it education? Did you take any preventive measures to make sure that there is buy-in, no resistance from either the technical teams or the government teams?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, was there any pushback when you rolled out the project? And how did you mitigate that pushback?
No.
In the Colombian context from institutions?
No, actually, we didn't. Pushback refers to exactly?
The local governments or other institutions in Colombia, did they offer any resistance to this project?
No, as I mentioned in the introduction, they support a lot this project. They help us a lot to solve the different problems, the regulatory, the legal problems that we found, because it's not only technical, the problems that we found. But yeah, we were very lucky because of that, because from the presidency, from the ICT ministry, from the General Inspector Office, from the Colombia Compra Eficiente, that is the e-procurement process agency, and the local governments, they all support the development of the project. So yeah, I think that maybe, I have to say, this is a POC. You know, you have to wait if you want to do it for the whole country, if some barriers will appear. That you have to, but at the moment, it's a very good support, but we don't know in the future. I have to say it.
I'll add that there was that question related to cryptocurrency fees and the public sector institutions, if this were to be used at a wider scale, being concerned about whether they, as the tendering entities, whether they're able to buy ether for gas fees to submit their tender offers and make decisions. So that was a question that we faced. And then another political challenge that came up was that election cycles were happening over the year and a half that we were developing this process. So it wasn't resistance from the government, but there would be a change in a mayorship or a governorship, and a procurement auction might not happen at the time that we were expecting when we wanted to pilot, or we had to restart conversations about this project with the new mayor or things like that.
And so you mentioned, Mauricio, that, you know, what happens if it's rolled out to the entire country? There's a question in the chat about, did you make any design decisions that would be helpful to scale the project in the future? And then, you know, and this is also a question for Rachel, what are the next steps for the projects? How can governments, you know, learn from them and maybe also implement similar projects?
Yeah, for this first stage, we designed the project for a specific case. There is the procurement for child meal for the schools, because there was a very important corruption case here in Colombia. So we developed the platform for that specific case. And in this phase, we want to know if it helped to improve transparency and security and in the process. Proving that, it will come the next phases.
Right. And Rachel, do you want to address the sort of the next step?
Sure, and also sort of to just briefly address the other question at a higher level is that generally these types of solutions wouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. There's definitely aspects of them that I think would be translatable, but you know, whether it's focusing on a locality or national context or even different industries, like in this focusing on the school lunch program, it might require slightly different specifications. And this also speaks to the goals of our report, which was the report contains a variety of tools that Ashley talked about at the beginning, a model RFP with technical specifications, basic evaluation framework, and a menu of policy recommendations amongst other aspects. And so we're hoping that these tools in our analysis can help other government actors assess if this type of technological solution is appropriate for their context now or in the future, and then also how can they leverage our findings to best fit their needs. And so that's the hope.
Great. So before we take a few other questions, I wanted Ashley to leave us with a few last words, and maybe also other participants, just to wrap up, and then we'll get into the questions.
Thanks. So if we were to summarize the conclusions and the takeaways, actually overall the value proposition of blockchain was found to be ambiguous or mixed or equivocal, sort of dependent on the conditions. There are a lot of benefits that were quite evident. And on the right, it's a screenshot from our report, but basically you have this unparalleled censorship resistant data permanent aspect of recording records on Ethereum or a public permissionless blockchain with high security and hash power. For instance, you can't delete the record that a vendor submitted a bid in the first place. And this is highly valuable for corruption contexts. So in general, we believe blockchain is very high potential for corruption where you really want that data permanence. And then when you couple it with these other capabilities like automatic smart contract functionalities that can decentralize away from human decision-making and powers into having these be automated, that can be beneficial. However, there were downsides and limitations with public permissionless blockchain. And on the right, there's a whole index of them that we discuss in the report. And I'll just speak the most important ones in our view. One was this challenge of maintaining vendor anonymity. So, you know, it's challenging because of the gas fees that vendors have to pay. These one-time pseudonymous accounts that they create are a way for us to get around this anonymity challenge. But to really have an effective anonymity resolution, it would be great to use modern cryptography techniques like ZK snarks or others to really hide sender, receiver, transaction details to really preserve that vendor anonymity. But at present, it's challenging to have this anonymity. And secondly, you know, one city could run this program for a tender auction, but at 15 transactions per second, Ethereum certainly can't handle auctions across the world or even within many auctions within one country. So we need to wait for scalability solutions on the first or second layer of Ethereum to be developed to really point to the value to wanting to use public permissionless blockchain or for any blockchain, not only Ethereum, of course. But these anonymity and scalability problems really point to the limitations of permissionless blockchains right now until we're able to get more efficient, effective anonymity and scalability solutions. And then there are some other challenges on the right. We talked about draining and spamming attacks. Some of these get addressed if you use permissioned or hybrid blockchains. So just wanted to briefly point out that you could keep an eye out in our report coming out on Wednesday that we do analyze how these problems, which are on the left side of this chart here, how they could be addressed in a permissioned blockchain or a hybrid blockchain. And the hybrid one being certain transactions are conducted on a permissioned blockchain, such as this, the submission of the bids, and the evaluation decisions of the government, but records are also taken at the same time with hashes posted on Ethereum or a permissionless blockchain that has that security to make sure that records aren't tampered with or bids aren't erased from the system, things like that. So you compare the two to have a hybrid blockchain network. But of course, in the end, it's this permissionless blockchain that has the highest security against deleting records, much more than a permissioned blockchain, where the participants, depending on the consensus algorithm, can of course decide together to remove records if they want, or in a centralized database where a central administrator could delete a record without other people knowing. So we really hope that in the future this could be done on our permissionless blockchain, but these anonymity and scalability challenges have some problems for now. So that's the snapshot key findings that you'll see in the report as well.
Great, thank you. And one of the questions that we have in the chat is, what were your key indicators for success for this pilot that you set your, before the pilot started? What metrics did you use to say, okay, this is what we want to prove, and this will be successful if we achieve this, this, and this?
We did design metrics. Rachel, I'm not sure if you want to speak to that. You laid them out.
Yeah, sure. So we haven't actually deployed the framework yet. The auction on the blockchain platform has not yet occurred, but we, in our report, do provide a model evaluation framework, which I think ideally would be even further developed once you're evaluating a blockchain-based auction. And it's really hard to come up with these indicators for corruption just because it's not something that's easily measured. So what we did is we developed a framework that triangulates from a bunch of different sources, and then we came up with 4 different performance categories: transparency, accountability, prevention and fairness, and then sort of more general metrics like cost, usability, functionality. And then we also provide a further breakdown within each of those 4 indicators of, so what counts as transparency, for example, the timeliness of information published, or what counts as something that would measure accountability, how accessible is the platform for all actors, including third-party observers. And this type of evaluation is most useful if you have these kind of metrics on past procurement auctions. But it would also be useful in and of itself. So we also provide that as well.
Great, thank you. I don't have any more questions in the chat. Does anyone want to raise any last points or items that we have not covered? No, I don't see anything. So thank you so much for your time. This was really informative, and we wish you all the success for the next steps of the project. And we'll be looking out for the publication of your report on June 17th. I will share that report with the participants of this call, as well as the recording of this call. And we'll share also your contact details if you're permitted, if people have any questions and they want to reach out for this specific project. I also want to highlight that this year DEF CON has been announced, or the next DEF CON has been announced in Colombia. And maybe Mauricio, you want to say a few things about that? Yeah,
we're very excited because the Ethereum Foundation selected Bogota to be the 2021 base of DEF CON 6. So we're very honored to have you all guys here and to show the city and an amazing country that we have, and to do some business and to learn and to share. It will be great. We are very, very happy. And of course, we are going to present the result of this project in DEF CON 6. Right, Ashley?
So see you in Colombia and hope to see you before that, as travel restrictions are are starting to lift. Thank you everyone for participating. Have a great day. Thank you WEF team. Thank you Mauricio. And see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Bye-bye.